Is this the only one I got right? I'm just looking at it now. Have I got every single prediction wrong? The Premier League season is over, so let's go and find out through the lens of hindsight how foolish I was at the start of the season by reviewing my Premier League predictions and also just giving a very brief overview and review of the 2021-22 season as a whole. We'll be touching on Manchester City in a separate video. I've got the actual Premier League table in front of me. I've also got my predictions from the start of the season in front of me. If you want to go watch that video, I'll pop it in a corner or something if you want to. Go give that a watch just to see my initial thoughts and then go, oh, you moron, you really thought Leeds were going to finish there? You idiot. If you want to be Captain Hindsight, you're more than welcome to. But anyway, relegated sides were Norwich, Watford and Burnley relegated on the final day of the season. Norwich and Watford were relegated much earlier on, a number of weeks ago. And I did predict Watford to get relegated. I did predict Norwich to get relegated. I got the order wrong. However, there was only a point in it either way. So I'm quite happy with that prediction, although I think that was pretty obvious that both Norwich and Watford were going down. In terms of their season, awful. Watford, once again, this weird chopping and changing of managers. You're not Chelsea. Doesn't work. And this season, once again, they've had 3 different managers this season, ending with Roy Hodgson. Did nothing for them, getting relegated in the end. Just awful throughout the whole season. Norwich, they just can't hack it. In the Premier League, it seems, they are almost like the definition of a yo-yo club in recent years. Watford is becoming that as well. I do expect Norwich to come straight back up because that is what they do. But at the end of the day, they've just not scored nearly enough goals. Quite frankly, in fact, how many goals have they scored? How many goals have they scored? 23 goals in the Premier League. They've scored 23 goals, which is literally the worst in the division. They've also conceded 84 goals, which is, you guessed it, the worst in the division. So I think that tells you everything you need to know. They can't score goals, and they can't not concede goals. That's Norwich's story. Watford, that we touched on, just not good enough generally. Now, I did not predict Burnley to get relegated. I predicted Southampton to get relegated. In fairness, Southampton did only finish 5 points above the relegation zone. They've had a very odd season. And the reason why I thought they were going to get relegated was because they were losing Danny Ings to Villa, who didn't do it nearly as well as I thought they were going to do. And Southampton for the last few years have been that club where they actually were sort of like, fighting for the European spots at one point. But this sensational recruitment strategy, bringing in players, selling them on for a very considerable sum and profit, and then rinsing and repeating, that can only last so long. It's because even if you've got the best scouts in the world, sometimes they're not always going to be able to get it right. And you think of all the players that have left Southampton. If you think of all the players that left Southampton in recent years, you could build an amazing team. You think of like Van Dijk and Mane and Lallana and Klein. And there's so many others that I'm forgetting. There's so many others that I'm forgetting off the top of my head. Oh, Højbjerg as well. If you want to go really far back, you can even look at the likes of Gareth Bale and Theo Walcott. So Wanyama. So many players that they've had, but they've just struggled this season, frankly. And they've finished, but they did finish higher than I thought they were going to finish. That was my logic for them being relegated. Ultimately, they were fine. They finished in 15th. I predicted them in 18th place. And in terms of who just survived on the final day, it was Leeds United. In my predictions, I thought Leeds would not necessarily have a second season syndrome, but I did think they were going to be much less effective in the second season. But I did still think Bielsa was going to be able to get them through. Leeds at one point were, along with Norwich, the worst side across the top 5 European leagues in terms of expected goals against, essentially. Essentially, they had the worst defensive stats across Europe. That's how bad they were. I think of like the 7-0 pumping at the Etihad, for example. Even United, who had an awful season, will get onto them. Even they were able to batter them at Old Trafford. I believe it was 4-1 or 5-1 in the end. Just able to survive on the last day of the season. They finished 17th. I predicted them to finish in 11th place. Behind that is a beautiful thing. And again, Everton just finishing above Leeds, somehow surviving by game wins against Chelsea and United. And a couple other teams in there, just able to survive. I thought they'd get 9th. I thought Rafa Benitez was going to be a very good appointment. Thought they were still a fair few players off, but I thought they were going to be able to kick on and progress a little bit from last season. And that just didn't happen. They went in reverse, in free fall. I've done a video explaining why Everton are so bad, so I won't go into the full ins and outs of it. Again, you just like go back on my previous videos, type in, why are Everton so bad? Nobbins, it'll come up. But it's basically, in summation, it's just poor and confused recruitment and lack of cohesion of managers. And you've seen that with Benitez, now Frank Lampard, who's not a good manager, frankly. Frank Lampard, not a good manager. Frankly, do you get it? It's a pun. It's a pun. So I wouldn't be surprised if they were in a relegation battle again next season. But yeah, they finished in 16th and way below my prediction of 9th place. Southampton, we've touched on. Aston Villa finished in 14th place. I thought they were going to finish in 6th. That's why I predicted them. I really thought they were going to be able to do something, especially with that Jack Grealish money. And they did spend it, I thought, on some very exciting, interesting players, the likes of Bailey. But they've struggled so much from injury this season, I feel like, and some key personnel. But again, I thought Ings was a very good signing. Happened later down the line, but I thought Digne was a good signing from Everton. I do think next season they will be better for under Gerrard in a second season. When Grealish was injured, they just capitulated and they just could not handle it. And it's a similar situation. I feel like they've lost their talisman to City, who we'll obviously get onto, and just not been able to. As I said, I don't think they've been helped out by injuries. In fairness, I do think they'll do better next year. But yeah, 6th place. I thought they were going to get Europe. Brentford, amazing season, unbelievable season for Brentford. I thought they were going to survive. I kept being told by people who watched the Championship last year that they were going to get relegated. I had them in 17th place, but they were an amazing season, sensational stuff for a newly promoted side, a club of that size. They got some very good points against some of the bigger sides this season as well. You think of like the 3-3 against Liverpool, for example. They were very good. I'm amazed, genuinely amazed that they finished in 13th place, staggering. They may have had probably, like, along with City, like the best season in the Premier League relative to like what you'd expect, relative to their spend. In fact, out of all the current Premier League sides, Brentford are the only one the last 10 years to have a positive net spend. Everyone else is like spent so much more money, which is to be expected. Brentford are actually in profit over the last decade. Crystal Palace finished in 12th place, and I think they've had an excellent season. I thought they finished in 16th, so I totally undersold them. I thought Vieira would need more time to adapt. I didn't think he'd flop like a lot of people were saying. I thought he'd be fine, but I am surprised at how good they have been. It was a massive ask to adapt Palace from Hodgson's Palace to Vieira's totally new look Palace. A lot of players went, I don't know the exact age profile, but I feel like last season Palace were one of the oldest sides in the division. I am sad that Burnley have been relegated, because in terms of their overall squad value, their squad value is worse than the likes of Fulham and Bournemouth, Championship sides. So in terms of the player quality, they are really a Championship side. But I was just about to talk about Newcastle, but they lost Chris Wood to Newcastle, who at the time were a relegation rival. But they did sack Sean Dyche, and I don't care how poorly you do, and I don't think you sack Sean Dyche. So even though I'm very gutted to see them go, I sort of feel like they deserve it in a way. I don't think you can sack Sean Dyche and get away with it. I think it does prove that it was the wrong decision overall, because what Dyche has done for that club like Burnley, how he's been able to keep them in the Premier League for so many years. So it's a shame in a way, but at the same time, it's probably just rewards for sacking Dyche. So a tricky on Burnley. But yes, sorry for forgetting about them. Moving on to Newcastle. Now, I said Newcastle would finish in 14th place. They actually finished in 11th place. They were actually going to be relegated. I think they probably would have been relegated, but for the huge buyout. And no one could have predicted that buyout to happen this season. No one could have predicted the massive amount of investment in the winter transfer window, in the January transfer window. So I'd be amazed if anyone actually really predicted Newcastle to finish that highly, because the squad at the start of the season and the managerial position was poor, untenable. The Newcastle that finished the season is not the same as the Newcastle that started the season, if that made sense. It's just like it's chalk and cheese, night and day, in terms of like the squad that started and ended the season, and the whole atmosphere around the club as well. So genuinely an unpredictable one. And then we've got Wolves in 10th place. I thought 13th place, so not too far off, only 3 points difference. Wolves were very good defensively this season, not good enough going forwards. frustrated some of the big teams at times. Certainly frustrated City at the Etihad. But yeah, I think they've got to be happy with a 10th place finish. Brighton, I thought Brighton were going to do well. I always talk about how much I love Brighton. I love Graham Potter. I think he's an excellent manager. I think Brighton play very good football. And I thought 12th was being optimistic, and I thought I was potentially even overselling them. But they finished 9th place. It was top half of the table. A club like Brighton, this is their highest league position in their history. I'm pretty sure. I don't think they've ever finished higher than 9th in the top flight. Certainly not in the Premier League era. Graham Potter just doing absolute bits, showing why a club like Everton, or I even think Man United, should have gone for Graham Potter, really. We'll see what Eric Ten Hag can do, but I really rate Graham Potter. I do think that he could be a future England manager and a future, like a big club manager. I do think he is that good. I genuinely would take him at City. I do think he's that good. Leicester finished in 8th, and where did I say they'd go? Oh, I said 5th place, so I thought they were going to get Europa League. Again, they had a hot and cold season, Leicester. They've done well over the last couple of years, but I feel like they really need to get Champions League football either last season or the season before. I can't remember which season it was where they basically bottled it. So a bit of a shame for Leicester, but 8th place is not too bad, but they did miss out on the European spots. And then we do move on to the European spots. West Ham finished in 7th. I said 10th. David Moyes has done an excellent job there. Bowen's been on mad form this season. They've done really well. They also did well in the Europa League, and I know they're not in the Europa League now. They just missed out. If they beat Brighton on the last day, they would have actually overtaken United. But you think of you think of the value of the squad and on all the wages compared to everyone else above them. It's a really good achievement to finish in 7th place and 3 points higher than I thought they would. So yeah, huge shout out to West Ham. Man United, I thought they were going to get Champions League football. I said 4th place. They actually got 6th place with a neutral goal difference. They scored 57. They conceded 57. They got 58 points. This is their lowest ever finish in Premier League history. I think it's good the likes of Pogba are going. Pogba's off, Cavani's off, Mata's off. So much dead wood is leaving the club. And Eric Ten Hag has a huge battle on his hands. And I did a video explaining why I don't think he's going to be able to succeed in that battle as United manager. He's got his work cut out for him. That's a huge understatement. I think if I was a United fan, I'd want maybe 2 or 3 players that are currently playing, and I'd want them to still be at the club in 3 years' time. A huge squad overhaul is needed, and that will not take 1 year or 2 years, maybe not even 3 years. Could be looking at upwards of 4 years to rebuild that whole squad. This isn't FIFA. It will take a long time to get rid of a lot of the deadwood and bring in all the players you want. Not even in the Champions League, can't necessarily attract the sort of player you might want to attract. You might be attracting a mercenary type, as we've seen in the past with Di Maria. That obviously didn't work out well. So yeah, just a poor season from United, and in relative terms, it probably is the worst season out of, apart from maybe the ones that have been relegated. But in relative terms, it is definitely like the bottom tier of what you define as being a good or a bad season, relative to the fact that United have spent the most out of anyone over the past 10 years. I think of the value of that squad. You think of how much has been spent on that squad. You think of how much the players are earning at that club. You think of players like Rashford not even wanting to try when he's coming on in a Manchester derby, and he's supposed to be a Manchester United fan and a local kid and a local man nowadays. And it's just really odd that club. I think everyone has been surprised at how good Arsenal have been this season. You'd say at the start of the season, look, 5th place, amazing achievement, and relative to Arteta's experience, relative to the squad issues that are happening at Arsenal. Aubameyang leaving in January, obviously not a good influence in the dressing room. However, there was a position in the season, can't remember exactly the situation, but I believe Arsenal were 6 points ahead of 5th place or 6th place, and they also had games in hand, and they've failed to finish in the top 4. So it was in their hands, but they've played themselves out of being in the Champions League. So obviously, at the start of the season, you take 5th place because I don't think anyone really gave you a chance of finishing in 5th. But relative to what actually transpired in the season, I think you've got to be disappointed if you are an Arsenal fan. But good signs from Arteta in terms of getting that squad where he wants it to be. Spurs actually finished in 4th, and I said 7th place. God, my predictions have been absolutely dog. Absolutely dog. Spurs, I did not see them sacking Nuno so soon. I did not see them bringing in Antonio Conte, in all fairness. I think at that point, I maybe had a thing in my head of maybe Kane would leave Spurs. But ultimately, Kane stayed. Conte joined, who's a world-class manager, and he's been able to get that squad and that club into the Champions League, and he's done much better than I ever thought they would be able to do. In terms of the top 3 then, I got Chelsea and Liverpool the wrong way round. I did think, even though I did put Chelsea second, I did think it was going to be not Chelsea finishing ahead of Liverpool by a significant amount of points, but I did think it would be a 3-horse race, and I thought that maybe Liverpool would be in it until like the penultimate game of the season, and then maybe it would be between City and Chelsea the last game of the season. So I did think it was going to be a 3-horse title race. But I think it's fair to say that Lukaku has failed in his first season relative to not only the price tag, but also what he was brought in to do. Because he was brought in to be the main man up front. He was brought in to score lots of goals for Chelsea and turn them from, I assumed, from 4th place into title challenges. Didn't really happen. They ended up finishing only 3 points ahead of 4th place Spurs, and ultimately around 20 points off the 2 teams actually going for the title. So hugely disappointing season for Chelsea. Too many draws. I'm just looking at it now. Too many draws. Not able to turn those draws into wins ultimately. And also the whole ownership Abramovich thing couldn't have helped either. There was a noticeable drop off after that happened. Not that they were in a title race anyway by that point, but that will probably all be sorted by the end of next season. But by the start of next season, Liverpool, I think, did much better than I thought they were going to do. They were the one to actually push City, not Chelsea. I think the main reason why I thought Liverpool might not fail, but wouldn't push City as much as they would, is because, in general, I think it's fair enough to say that at the start of the season anyway, you could maybe say that Liverpool's squad depth wasn't quite as good as the likes of City, but they did bring in Diaz in January. And also, I also thought the African Cup of Nations could have been a bit of an issue for Liverpool because they would have been losing Mane and Salah for that period. But I don't actually think they dropped points during AFCON. So it actually didn't make any difference at all. So Liverpool obviously had a very good season to finish in 2nd place. Just a point behind City ultimately. But the issue for them was that, actually, I think the issue for Liverpool really was when it came to the games against the big teams, they just weren't able to beat them. Against City, they drew twice, and I'd suggest that City certainly played better than Liverpool at the Etihad. I'd argue they edged the game at Anfield as well. They failed to beat Spurs. In fact, the game between Spurs and Liverpool at Anfield potentially, gave City the title in a way, because that was the last time they dropped points. That allowed City that wiggle room against West Ham. They went 2-0 up against Chelsea at Chelsea and managed to throw away that 2-goal lead. So they didn't get any wins over the top 4 teams. Obviously, they're in the top 4, but they didn't beat City, they didn't beat Chelsea, they didn't beat Spurs. Whereas, so they accumulated 6 points against the other 3 teams in the top 4, whereas City and Chelsea and Spurs all got 8 points. So I think that was probably Liverpool's Achilles heel this season, really, not being able to turn draws into wins against the big teams. 8 draws this season, and 6 of those draws were against City, Chelsea, Spurs. So that was the issue for them this season. Just able to, for the most part, able to breeze past the lesser teams, smaller teams, the weaker teams, whatever, just able to overpower them. But when it came to big crunch matches against Spurs, Chelsea, City, not quite able to get enough to turn draws into wins, and that is ultimately what's cost them the league title this season. But I did get one... In fact, is this the only one I got right? I'm just looking at it now. Because even though I predicted Norwich and Watford to go down, I didn't get the order right. Have I got every... Have I got every single prediction wrong? I think I have. Oh my god, that's so bad. I mean, that's quite staggering, to be fair. I like to think I sort of half know what I'm talking about when it comes to football. Wow. Yeah, so literally I got one prediction right this season. And that was Manchester City to win the Premier League title. Unfortunately, that's the most important prediction from my perspective. But the fact is, I got every other position wrong. Some of them were only one out, in fairness, like Liverpool, Chelsea, that swapped. You know, Watford, Norwich, that swapped. I thought I would have got like maybe 5 or so correct. But I've actually only got 1. But at least it was guessing who wins the Premier League title, the most important one. Manchester City won it. Matchday Vlog was on the channel the other day for the final game of the season, and I will be doing. I do want to dedicate a full video to this season of Manchester City, and just like echoing how good I think this side are, and sort of also what to look forward to next season. But yes, guys, those are my predictions. Let me know how good your predictions were. Were they as bad as mine, or am I genuinely just awful and abhorrent at predicting Premier League places? Yeah, I'm just staggered. I'm staggered at how bad I've done. That's actually embarrassing. And on that note, I'm going to leave you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Please make sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you are new. If you are new, I'll see you next time.